XYZ University offers generational intelligence and services for businesses and associations looking to engage young talent and members. Our speakers, researchers, and strategists are here to teach you everything you need to know about generations X, Y, and Z. For more information, visit xyzuniversity.com.
You're listening to the Gen Z podcast, where we explore and explain the latest generation entering the workforce and marketplace. One thing is certain, Generation Z is unlike their predecessors, and understanding their unique motivations, attitudes, and influences will make you future-focused. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Gen Z podcast. My name is Josh Miller and I'm the Director of Gen Z Studies at XYZ University. I'm here today with Tyler Ebert and Frank Jaskulke, and we'll be tackling the topic of Gen Z in healthcare and in medicine. Tyler Ebert is the CEO of Adrenacard Pharmaceuticals, a specialty pharmaceutical company that combines proven, life-saving drugs with devices that make them easier to carry, more intuitive to use, and accessible to those who need them. He's a recent graduate of the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota, and he's really on the forefront of the medtech space. And we'll talk more about Tyler's business a little bit later on in the conversation today. Frank Jaskulke is the VP of Intelligence at the Medical Alley Association. The Medical Alley Association supports and advances the global leadership of Medical Alley's healthcare industry, ranging from startups to major players in the healthcare space. Frank's role of VP of Intelligence is to ensure that association members have better information to make better decisions. So Frank, Tyler, thank you so much for being with me on the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to it. So I want to kick it off with a question to Frank. And Frank, my question to you is, what has been the impact of Gen Z on the healthcare space thus far?
Yeah, I think Gen Z is having a large impact on healthcare already, both in the sense that they're increasingly large consumers of healthcare, right? They have health and wellness needs like anyone else, but maybe more importantly, that they're digital first, right? They've grown up in a world where a lot of these digital technologies were always there and were a truly normal way of interacting. And so we've seen that their expectations about how they get healthcare services, how they get healthcare information are very different from people who might have grown up in a different environment. I think that over time, especially as they get older and they become the drivers of purchasing healthcare, is really going to change how we deliver healthcare, where we purchase it, and how we pay for it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so one of the biggest things that I know is sort of haunting the healthcare industry, if not now, in a few years in the future, is sort of the workforce piece, right? When we're looking at retirements of baby boomers and really struggling just demographically to fill some of those voids that have been left in the workforce. What do you think that educational systems could be doing better when preparing students for a career in the healthcare industry?
Yeah, there's this kind of real fine line that educational institutions have to walk, educating and training students to be able to do good work in general, to do the jobs that exist today, but also to prepare a workforce to do things we can't even anticipate in the future. I feel for the schools that they have this really, really tough job. When we talk to our companies that are hiring, that are growing, a couple of themes come up a lot. One is, call it the humanities side of things, that even in the scientific roles, the ability to write well, to speak well, to articulate an argument is increasingly important, combined with having a broad knowledge in science and technology. Maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, healthcare could afford to be very siloed. You did device, you did drug, you treated pediatrics, you treated urology. But increasingly we're realizing all of these things are connected. And so there's a lot of power to make healthcare better if you have a holistic understanding of what's going on, not just some deep domain knowledge in an area. So again, it's a challenge. challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great, great point. And especially when we look at how do educational systems sell that both to employers and to students, where we say, we know you're probably going to go into this specific industry, but we really think it's going to serve you better off in the long term to have a more holistic knowledge. And so how do educational systems sort of portray that long-term mindset as opposed to the short-term gains? And so that's something that educational systems are really going to need to think about.
Yeah, and that, I think you highlighted a real tension in the system of, companies need employees now, which is totally fair. They're trying to grow. They need that workforce. But they're also going to need employees in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So how do we prepare a flexible workforce, a flexible population to deal with the challenges today and the challenges tomorrow? And honestly, I don't know that I have a great answer.
I don't know if anyone has a great answer. But one thing I can speak to is the experience I've had getting into the space. Like Josh mentioned, I'm a recent graduate from the University of Minnesota. I definitely benefited from the amazing programs they had. And I guess I can speak to it to 2 points, both my own experience and what I've witnessed them doing with other students and other people that I've both had a chance to hire and hopefully will be hiring in the near future. From my experience, one thing I appreciated about the University of Minnesota is many of my professors would talk about this idea of T-shaped skill sets. The idea that you still develop your expertise. I mean, you still learn everything you need to know about urology, but that doesn't exclude you from having to learn a relatively broad set of other things. Learn enough about these other topics, whether it's the humanities or other soft skills that allow you to function well within a team, or at least know what you need to do as the world changes. Frank made a really good point, that idea of anticipating challenges that currently don't exist, or jobs that don't exist, or roles in a workforce that don't exist. I was very impressed with what the University of Minnesota and some of the other programs I was involved with did. I mean, the prime example of this would be my business partner, Chris. He came out of the University of Minnesota. He knows his engineering space as well as he can, but I've continually been impressed by his ability to jump in other areas and, how articulate a management standpoint despite being trained as an engineer. And I realize that sounds horrible. The university has done a really good job of training people that have that T-shaped skill.
For sure. And, speaking from personal experience, as I am a junior in high school, and I'm looking towards what do I want to major in, what schools do I want to go to, the research that we've done at XYZ University has shown that the majority of Gen Zs know what career they want to go into at a younger and younger age. Is that a good thing, or is that a bad thing? And I think it's a good thing because it allows us to specialize, and it allows organizations to get into the minds of Gen Zs earlier than ever. But I've also been thinking, so for example, I have a very big interest in business. But, the problem with that is that as I've been going to a lot of these schools, a lot of them don't even have undergraduate business programs. And so then my thought is, how do I take my business knowledge and then use that to learn about something that I may not otherwise had wanted to learn? So you have a lot of schools that sort of preach sort of a common core curriculum where you have to, even if you want to be a STEM major, you have to take classes in the humanities. Like I said, that is a tough sell for a lot of students who say, why am I ever going to need this? But is the point of school to teach students what to think or how to think? And I think that is the million-dollar question.
And I might just build on that I think the T-shaped skill sets really gets at this challenge. Like, there is this motivation. I think we all at some point knew there was something we wanted to do. I'll say from my experience, the thing I wanted to do, and then the thing I ended up doing, and the thing I'm now doing, 3 completely different things, and it's actually worked out really well. And I don't think, I know I would not have predicted 10, 15, 20 years ago that this is what I would do or want to do. So that T-shaped skill set idea of you have an interest in going deep into it and really learning what you're interested in, because you'll be more motivated, you'll do better in it, but then building that broader skill set. In the work that I do, where we're working with large companies, small companies, private, nonprofit, public officials, I'm constantly surprised how many of the different skill sets I have to draw on from my education that were not necessarily directly related to my degree, but drew a component from it. And I think to this day, maybe the best educational thing I did for work was in high school participating in debate and speech. Like, it has surprised me how much of business is about being able to present an idea, be challenged and respond to it, but take that input and look professional while doing it. And that wasn't related to domain knowledge. It was the top of the T in the skill set of the broad set of knowledge that I can apply to the depth that I have.
Right. That's really interesting. And so I want to shift the conversation a little bit to what the Medical Alley Association has been doing to help prepare students for that. So what do training programs and educational opportunities look like through the Medical Alley Association?
Yeah, so there's two big areas that we work in around education, workforce, and trying to increase the capability here. One is working with the higher education institutions in the state and beyond Minnesota, and working with some of the K-12 systems in the state to help them understand the breadth and depth of the healthcare industry. Quite often people think if I'm going to work in healthcare, I'm a doctor, a nurse, a scientist, or an engineer. And there are so many more opportunities in healthcare that draw on a very diverse set of skills. We want to raise that awareness. We then want to make it easier for those schools to get access to cutting-edge knowledge, cutting-edge technology, and the people to build those relationships and make sure they can provide their students, whether it's K through 12 or higher education, with the best experiences and the best opportunities so they'll have a higher chance of success when they graduate. The third thing that we do is internally, we deliver about 30 programs a year that they're not really trainings in the truest sense of you're coming out learning a skill. Rather, we're bringing in speakers and we're bringing in thought leaders around where healthcare is going in the future to help people understand what might impact their business down the road. So they may be prepared for today, but how do they prepare for tomorrow or 5 years? We've really focused our efforts on that.
Right. That's really interesting, and I think a lot more associations should sort of hold that mindset. What's some feedback that you've gotten from members that have said, this is great, but it's just not relevant now? How do you approach that question?
Yeah, so we went through this big transformation in our training. For many years, we would do 100 to 150 truly training events a year, mostly on regulatory and technical topics in the industry. And they were very popular, they were very well consumed. And then technology started to change the need for that. All of a sudden, a lot of this kind of basic training you could get online. You could get webinars, you could find other resources, and it wasn't the thing that was now being served well. So we shifted to this model of delivering what's happening in the future. The feedback we get from a lot of members is it changes the audience. It tends to be more relevant to those who are in management of a company because that's what they're tasked with, thinking about where will we go tomorrow, not necessarily what we're doing today. But it has been a challenge with some of our members who they were used to the thing we had done for 20 years. And it took a lot of conversations to talk about where we saw the world going, what was happening to us as a business. We're a nonprofit, but there's still bills to pay. Mm-hmm. And if we couldn't attract an audience, then we couldn't support the mission. It took a lot of complex conversations with the members to hear them out and to share where we were going. And I think as they heard where we were going, they saw the vision of it. They started to understand. They saw that in their own businesses and came along on the journey with us.
Interesting. That's really, really interesting. And so right here we have a member of the Medical Alley Association in Tyler. So Tyler, I want to shift the conversation over to you a little bit. Give us a little bit of insight into what you've been doing and some of your thoughts on Gen Z with hiring and working with young people.
Like you mentioned before, Adrenacard's a pharmaceutical company. And what we specialize in doing is we take emergency drugs that are generic. They've been around a while, they've been proven. We take them and we combine them with new delivery systems. Systems are often smaller than what you've seen before. They're easier to carry, more intuitive to use. Part of our mission, what we are trying to do is make it so they're more accessible, often more affordable than competing products. The best example I can give you is we're developing an alternative to the EpiPen. That's been in the news continually over the years. We have a product that delivers that same drug, but we believe in a better way. I started the company while I was in college. I was a junior at the time. I had met my business partner 6 months before we started the company and was convinced pretty early on, probably because of those T-shaped skills, that he was a guy I wanted to work with. We had looked at a couple of different med tech opportunities that we were interested in. We really did have this interest in medicine and healthcare for a variety of reasons. And this was an opportunity that stuck out. And so since then, we've been very blessed to be here in Minnesota, here in the Medical Alley. I mean, in this community, we've been able to raise capital. We've been able to build out a team. We've been able to work along our journey of getting this product approved. We currently don't have any products on the market, but we're marching toward that. Overall, like I said, being in this environment has been a big blessing for us. In regard to Gen Z, I need to let you know that I am all in on this generation. I'm super excited for two reasons. I mean, I've read a little bit of your research, Josh, and looking at the characteristics and values of this generation. Hands down, that's a kind of generation I want to not just have work for me, but I want to work with. I mean, in terms of what they're interested in, how they work, the skill sets they're going out of their way to develop, they're not being forced to. I'm a huge fan of that. In the more immediate sense, I have been a huge fan of what they've been able to do as, contract and intern and part-time work for my company. We've had a chance, and we've had more than half a dozen interns, different associates, contractors, consultants that are all, I believe, in that Generation Z category. They've just been a pleasure to work with because they are hungry. They're still able to build out those skill sets. Part of it might be the youth, but also part of it might be the ambition. They don't know what's impossible yet.
Yeah,
so they've been able to jump in and do some amazing projects.
That's really interesting. So talk to me a little bit more about the entrepreneurial sense of Generation Z. So I know that you've done a lot of work with some entrepreneurial organizations here in the area, and our research is showing that Generation Z is one of the most entrepreneurial generations yet, with estimates that over 70% of the generation either already have or want to start a business someday. And so you were a great example of somebody who's been in college and started a business from the ground up. What's some of your advice to members of my generation that have some of those same ambitions?
I've heard this saying said in numerous different forms, but I think it's important. You become the average of, the 5 to 10 people you spend the most time with. So one thing I prioritized doing really quickly after I moved to Minneapolis was spending as much time as possible in the communities that were most like what I wanted to become. I knew I wanted to be, an entrepreneur. I wanted to be a business owner. That had an appeal to me. So I was immediately hanging out with, for instance, the Home Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Minnesota. I was going to the Minnesota Cup, which is our big business plan competition. I started to hang in these communities. Those connections start to rub off, especially when you're a student. I'm pretty sure you know this. People want to share with you. They want to share their story. They want to share their experience. They want to share resources. So even before I had, a quote vehicle or a business for them to invest in, they were investing in me and working with me. That extended to healthcare too. Like I mentioned, I met my business partner, Chris. I was a junior at the time. As we were understanding we wanted to do something in the medical space, we started to reach out. We initially got connected with Medical Alley at that time. We started to go to different organizations in town. We actually started to audit MBA level med tech classes at the University of Minnesota. It started to rub off on us. That advice for me was spending time with those people, absorbing those skills, seeing how they talked, how they acted. In my mind, starting to walk through, all right, I see this problem. How would I solve it? Or how would this person that I look up to solve it? How would I be able to use the resources I'm seeing right now to solve that? And so for people who are interested in this space, and I'm sure Frank and I can list off a whole bunch of different reasons why they should be involved with this space, I think a great first step is to dive in and to learn.
And what sort of benefits has the Medical Alley Association brought you, and what benefits do you think that associations in general can give to young entrepreneurs and professionals like yourself?
Well, one of the biggest things that Medical Alley gave me, and I'm going to give Frank some credit here because he was the first person who responded to my call when I initially reached out to Medical Alley, was it gave me a sense of community. It gave me a non-judgmental introduction to everything this space had to offer. You and I first met, Frank. I mean, we had just come up with this idea. I think we had won maybe $1,000 worth of prize money in a biz pitch. I mean, we had funding. but we didn't know what we were going to do with it. We were still learning a lot of the regulatory stuff. All we had basically was our notes from class. Still, you sat down with me, along with, I believe, Greg at the time, and we sat down, and you treated us as if we had just walked in from Medtronic. I mean, it was great. You treated us like we were real business people. We were invited to a number of different events. Actually, I thought it was funny. You were talking about those events you put on that are kind of like trainings, management level. I attended every single one I could. I remember there was one in particular. It was on actually talent and recruiting younger people. And I was the only, quote-unquote, young person in that room. But in that meeting, I met a guy who, to this day, is one of my top suppliers. My business partners with him quite a bit. So that was a huge opportunity. Even though I was young, I was welcomed in. I was allowed to attend. I don't know if this is still true, but at the time, because we were connected with the university, there were no fees for us being involved. And so that whole idea of me getting involved with the organization and the community, they enabled that. I can't speak to what other associations do. I mean, this is the main one I'm a part of. But in terms of what they can do, building that community in both a formal and organic way is a huge value add.
That's really interesting.
And I might just add that what was unique, Tyler, when you first came to us, right, you presented like you had just come out of Medtronic, right? The professionalism that was there, the polish on it, even though it was early, right? So that becoming the average of the 5 or 10 people you spend the most time with, right? That was the impression we had got. And there are times when we meet with entrepreneurs who maybe are seemingly older, should be more quote-unquote professional and sophisticated, and aren't, and it's a harder thing to do. So I think it's a really great insight, that absorbing that knowledge and experience and way of carrying yourself almost from different people, from the people you want to be like. It had a powerful impact on us. I think we try to be good customer servants, period, but it certainly was easier because you came in with such professionalism.
Right. That's great. That's really, really cool. And so going back to sort of the talent workforce development piece, do you think that the medical field, the healthcare industry, is prepared for the next generation?
The healthcare and the medical field has a lot of challenges around just needing more workers, right? It's growing. We have an aging population. We need more people coming in. It's also, though, historically a conservative industry in the sense that you're dealing often with things where the consequences of being wrong can be life or death. And so sometimes as an industry we're slow moving at catching up to where the world is going. I think there are some challenges there, but it's mediated by the such great need to bring workforce in. And I'd agree with something Tyler said, that the values are so well aligned in this generation that I think that helps to solve for a lot of the challenges. They want to be in this field because it's mission driven. They want to help other people. They want to do good things. And this is an industry and a community where you can help people and do good things. So for as much as there may be some challenges, that value alignment combined with just the huge demand for workforce, I think is going to make it okay.
That's a really good take. Really, really interesting take. So before we wrap this up, any closing thoughts?
I would like to build a little bit off of what Frank mentioned right there. That idea of, is the business ready? How is this transition going to work? Because he made a really good point earlier on. There are people with hiring needs right now, and I know that Medical Alley is huge for people who need to hire and recruit right now. The talent that's out there, we can get the talent that's out there. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if you're playing that 25-year game, which realistically your listeners are playing, the question is, what can both the industry be doing right now to prepare for that 25-year game, and what can your listeners be doing right now to play that 25-year game? Because it's a two-way street. My question is an industry ever ready for a generational change? Are they ever ready for the long road of challenges ahead of it? I don't know that answer. My take on the medtech space is no. But that doesn't mean they can't resolve it. Have they ever been ready for any of the other generation shifts? My answer is no. But they have handled it. And I do believe that it has gotten better with every generation. Frank's point about, the need is great, and there's this overwhelming desire on both parts to do good stuff. I think that can smooth out so many of the differences. The biggest part, and I hope that there's one thing that your listeners can take away from me, is that it is also a two-way street. I did not go down the employee route, but I realized that if I had wanted to go work for Medtronic or Upshur Smith here in Minneapolis, I would have wanted them to make a few changes that maybe align more with my interests. But I also understand that I have to stand from the feet up and be a serious business person or a serious engineer or a serious doctor or care provider or pharmaceutical chemist or something. It is a two-way street. When it comes to understanding how the industry current works and getting an idea for yourself of what you want it to become, I feel like that's something you need to carry with you and think about now as you're looking at your career. To your earlier question, Josh, about do people figure out earlier on that they know what they want to do? Similar to Frank, what I thought I was going to be doing in high school to what I'm doing now is very different. But the underlying principles and the impact I want to have has not changed. And a question that I think came up earlier was kind of what's your pitch to Gen Z, or the idea of why should Gen Z be involved with healthcare? Realistically, with the resources we have in this generation and the education we've gotten, we can be successful in just about any line of business. I could be selling cars right now. I could be working in the dairy industry. And who knows, maybe I will be one day. But that idea, those values of wanting to make that impact and do well, this is a business where that overlaps so well. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're willing to think critically and be dedicated, develop your T-shaped skills, and then apply yourself, I see it as a space where you can have all of the above. And I think that's an amazing thing. So that's my pitch.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great spot to end. Once again, thank you so much to Tyler and Frank for being with me today on the podcast. I know that our listeners got a ton of value out of that. Really looking forward to working with Medical Alley and seeing what Tyler's Adrenocard can do. Again, we've been with Tyler Ebert and Frank Jaskulke. Thank you so much for listening to the Gen Z podcast. Until next time, I'm Josh Miller.
You've been listening to the Gen Z podcast. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. For more generational intelligence for the workplace, visit xyzuniversity.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.